Picture this. A man argues with his girlfriend, emotions run high, and instead of responding to every word she throws at him, he simply stops talking. He doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't fight. He becomes silent. At first, she might roll her eyes and pretend not to care. Maybe she even laughs it off, as if his silence doesn't mean anything. But give it time, and that silence will begin to echo louder than any words he could have said. That's when the weight of his absence hits her. Not his physical absence, but the absence of his attention, his validation, and his energy. Men often underestimate the power of silence in relationships. We're taught to believe that solving problems means talking more, explaining more, and constantly reassuring her. But here's what most men miss. Women are wired to notice what's missing more than what's present. When you're always available, always explaining yourself, always giving her your attention, she may not value it as much. But when you withdraw that energy, even without anger or punishment, she feels it deep. Silence becomes the message, and that message can shake her in ways words never could. This doesn't mean ghosting her, playing childish games, or disappearing without reason. It's about restraint. It's about knowing that not every reaction requires your voice. When you choose silence, you shift the balance. Suddenly, she's the one replaying the argument in her head. She's the one wondering what you're thinking, whether you've moved on, or if she's losing her grip on you. That uncertainty drives her deeper into her emotions. Silence is powerful because it creates space. And in that space, a woman has no choice but to face the impact of her own behavior. She starts questioning herself, her words, and her actions far more than if you had argued back. The longer you stay silent, the more intense her need to break it becomes. 1. Silence exposes her insecurities. When a man chooses silence instead of constant reaction, something powerful happens beneath the surface. A woman begins to feel the quiet like a mirror being held up to her own thoughts. Instead of focusing on what you said, she starts focusing on what she feels. And that shift can trigger insecurities she usually keeps hidden. Women by nature are highly tuned to signals. They notice tone changes, pauses, even body language in ways most men overlook. So when a man, especially one she's used to hearing from, stops feeding her with words, her mind doesn't stay still. It races. She begins asking herself questions. Did I go too far? Why isn't he answering me? Has his interest dropped? That silence, instead of being empty, becomes filled with her own doubts. Think about how often men over-explain themselves in conflict. You feel accused, so you defend yourself. You feel misunderstood, so you keep repeating the same points. In reality, the more you speak, the more material you give her to twist, interpret, and push back against. Silence, on the other hand, strips that away. There's nothing to grab onto, nothing to fight with. And that emptiness unsettles her far more than a heated argument ever could. A good illustration of this comes from the movie Gone Girl. There's a scene where Nick, the husband, is under public suspicion. Instead of lashing out at every accusation, he becomes quiet and reserved. The media, his wife, and everyone around him begin filling in the blanks of his silence with their own interpretations. The silence itself became louder than any defense he could have spoken. In a relationship, the same psychology applies. When you go silent, she starts projecting her own fears and insecurities into that gap. 2. Here's the important part. Silence doesn't mean stonewalling with anger. It means controlled restraint. You're not ignoring her like a child, and you're not punishing her. You're simply refusing to play the game of constant back and forth. That restraint places the spotlight on her emotions instead of yours. Suddenly, she's left alone with the echo of her words, replaying them in her mind, and questioning if she crossed a line. This is why silence exposes insecurity. It interrupts the cycle of her controlling the emotional frame. Without your words to counter or defend, she's forced to sit with the discomfort of her own behavior. For many women, that discomfort cuts deeper than anything you could have said in the heat of the moment. Silence works because it's unnatural to most people. We live in a world where everyone reacts instantly. Through texts, calls, social media posts, arguments. When you don't, you stand out. You show strength. You show that you're not ruled by impulse. And to a woman, that calm silence can be both unsettling and deeply attractive. The longer you hold it, the more her insecurities reveal themselves. 2. Attention withdrawal hurts more than words. If there's one thing most men underestimate, it's how powerful their attention really is. A woman thrives on it, whether she admits it or not. Your calls, your texts, your time, your energy, all of it feeds her sense of importance in the relationship. She may complain about you not doing enough, but the reality is that even the little things you give, she notices. And when you suddenly pull that energy back, it hits her harder than any argument ever could. Think about it. When you're constantly available, always answering right away, always engaging, always giving her the spotlight, she gets comfortable. She assumes it's guaranteed. She may even start taking it for granted. But once that pattern breaks, once you stop pouring all your attention into her, the silence of your absence is louder than any words you could speak. This is why withdrawal feels so heavy. It's not about ignoring her or treating her badly. It's about no longer feeding into the cycle of overgiving. You step back. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing. And that shift changes the entire dynamic. Every woman feels it differently. But the common thread is this. She notices. When your calls slow down, she notices. When you don't immediately jump to fix a problem, she notices. When you're not the one filling every gap in the conversation, she notices. At first, she might act like she doesn't care, but deep inside, that attention you used to give is missed. And the absence of it makes her start valuing what she once overlooked. This is also why men who chase endlessly often lose respect in a woman's eyes. Too much attention, especially when it's given no matter how she behaves, teaches her that you'll always be there no matter what. But when you pull back, when she feels that sudden distance, she starts to realize that your energy is not automatic. It has to be earned. What makes attention withdrawal so powerful is that it forces her to confront the reality that she doesn't control your focus. Your time and attention belong to you, and when you choose not to give them freely, it shifts the balance of power. She feels it emotionally, because at the end of the day, your attention is what gives her reassurance. Without it, the reassurance fades, and she's left with the uneasiness of not knowing where she stands. This doesn't mean you cut her off completely. It simply means you stop making her the center of your world. You live your life. You focus on your goals. You don't jump every time she calls. That simple withdrawal makes her rethink her position. She begins to see your attention as valuable, something she can't afford to lose. Words can be brushed off. Attention can't. And when you take it back, she feels it deeper than she'll ever admit. Third, her control weakens when you don't react. One of the strongest tools a woman relies on in a relationship is your reaction. Whether it's through emotion, frustration, or even your eagerness to explain yourself, she often knows exactly what buttons to press to get a response. The moment you give that response, she feels a sense of control. Not because she's evil or manipulative, but because attention and energy are power. If she can predict that you'll always react, she knows she has influence over you. Now, imagine a different approach. Instead of responding to every provocation, you remain calm. You don't argue. You don't raise your voice. You don't even show frustration. You sit in silence, steady, unshaken. Suddenly the dynamic shifts. What once gave her leverage no longer works. The power she thought she held begins to slip through her fingers because there's no fuel for the fire. Picture this. She throws out a sharp comment meant to sting, expecting you to defend yourself. Instead, you stay composed and let the silence carry. Minutes later, she's no longer focused on the point she wanted to make. She's fixated on why you didn't respond. The game flips. Instead of you being under her emotional control, she starts chasing your reaction. That's when she realizes her control weakens. Men often think they lose ground by not reacting, as if silence makes them appear passive. But it's the opposite. By not reacting, You create uncertainty in her mind. She can no longer predict your moves. She no longer has the satisfaction of knowing how you'll respond. That uncertainty unsettles her, because it means she's not holding the emotional steering wheel anymore. Every time you refuse to react, you send a clear message. Your emotions are yours to manage, not hers to control. And that is what creates respect. Because when you show that you won't be pulled into emotional traps, she starts to adjust her behavior. She recognizes that you're not someone she can push around with words or emotional swings. This doesn't mean you never speak up. It means you choose your words with intention, not in the heat of reaction. You don't hand over power by arguing at every turn. Instead, you keep your presence calm and firm, making her realize that her usual tactics no longer work. The strength of a man is measured in restraint, not in how loud he can be. When you choose silence over reaction, you take back the control she thought she had. And the more consistent you are with it, the weaker her grip on your emotions becomes. In time, she learns that control only exists when you allow it. And when you don't, she has no choice but to follow your lead. 4. Silence forces her to chase. When a man goes quiet, something shifts in the dynamic of the relationship. Women are naturally responsive to presence and attention. They thrive on engagement, whether it's through conversation, reassurance, or emotional exchange. When you pull that back and stop feeding into constant interaction, she begins to feel the imbalance. That's when the natural instinct to chase begins to surface. Most men don't realize how much they train women to expect constant access. By always answering right away, always explaining, always keeping the conversation alive, you make your presence predictable. Predictability feels safe at first, but it eventually reduces the sense of value. She knows she doesn't have to work for your time or your focus. It's simply handed to her. Silence disrupts that pattern. When you withhold words and stop rushing to fill every gap, she suddenly feels that absence. At first, it may frustrate her, but the longer it continues, the more it triggers something deeper. The desire to close the gap. She starts wondering what's going through your head. She begins checking if you've pulled back emotionally. She questions if she still holds the same place she thought she did. That questioning is what pushes her to re-engage with you on her own. The chase doesn't always show up in obvious ways. Sometimes it's her starting conversations she wouldn't normally start. Sometimes it's small gestures to get your attention. Other times it's a shift in her tone, becoming more agreeable or even affectionate to draw you back in. Regardless of how it shows, it comes from one source. Your silence created the need for her to bridge the distance. Men who constantly chase never see this side of women because they never allow the space for it to happen. By always filling the silence, you keep her comfortable in the position of receiving. But when you stop giving so freely, she feels the imbalance and instinctively works to restore it. This is where the power of silence lies. It flips the roles without you needing to say a word. It's important to understand that forcing her to chase doesn't come from manipulation. It comes from discipline. You're not ignoring her to punish her, and you're not shutting down completely. You're simply showing that you don't need to over-explain or over-pursue. That self-control naturally creates curiosity, and curiosity leads to pursuit. The longer you can hold your silence without breaking just to satisfy her, the stronger the chase becomes. She invests more energy, she puts in more effort, and she begins to value your attention again because it's no longer guaranteed. In the end, silence isn't about creating distance for the sake of it. It's about reminding her that your presence matters, and when it's not given so easily, she has to earn it. And when she feels that shift, she'll move toward you, because silence leaves her no choice but to chase. 5. She questions her own value. When you stop responding, when your silence becomes consistent, a woman doesn't just notice the absence of words, she begins to reflect inward. The longer it continues, the more it forces her to ask uncomfortable questions about herself. And the biggest one is this: am I losing my value in his eyes? This questioning isn't always visible at first. On the surface, she might pretend she doesn't care. She might act busy, laugh it off, or even try to dismiss your silence as unimportant. But deep inside, that quiet eats away at her confidence. Women are naturally tuned to how men respond to them. If she's used to constant reassurance, arguments, or attention, then silence feels like a void she can't explain away. It pushes her to reevaluate her place in your world. Every woman, no matter how confident she appears, seeks validation from the man she values. When she doesn't get it, the silence turns into a spotlight on her own doubts. She wonders if she's done something wrong, if she's no longer desirable, if she has lost the grip she once had. These thoughts repeat in her head, over and over, until the weight of your silence becomes heavier than anything you could have said. Think about the film A Star is Born. In one scene, when Jackson starts pulling away from Ally, it isn't his words that cut her deepest. It's his distance. His silence about his struggles makes her question her worth in his life. She begins to wonder if she's not enough, even though she's talented and admired by the world. That silence speaks louder than the applause she receives. It shows that no amount of outside validation can replace the one person's attention she truly values. The same principle works in everyday relationships. Your silence creates a void that only she can fill by reevaluating her behavior and questioning her role in your life. She might replay past conversations, analyze her tone, and revisit moments where she could have done better. Without you saying a word, she's already holding herself accountable. And here's the real power. When a woman questions her value with you, she also starts working harder to prove it. She becomes more attentive, more considerate, and more invested in keeping your attention. What she once took for granted suddenly becomes something she wants to earn again. Men who constantly explain themselves or chase after validation never give women the space to experience this. But men who use silence wisely force women to confront their own reflection. That reflection often leads her to realize that she doesn't want to lose her place by your side. Silence doesn't just expose insecurities, it makes her measure her own value. And when she feels that gap, she will move to close it, because no woman wants to feel like she's losing importance in the eyes of a man she respects. 6. Arguments lose power. Without your voice, arguments survive on fuel. They need energy, they need back and forth, and they need constant reaction to stay alive. When a woman tries to pull you into an argument, what keeps it going is not her words alone, it's your response. The more you explain, defend, or fight back, the more material she has to push against. But when you stay silent, when you refuse to feed it, the argument begins to lose its strength. Every man has been in that situation where a small disagreement turns into a never-ending cycle. You try to explain your point, but she finds a new angle. You defend yourself, and she twists it into another reason to be upset. Before long, you're drained, repeating yourself, and wondering how a simple conversation turned into a storm. That's the trap. The moment you argue back, you hand her the tools to keep the conflict alive. Silence changes that dynamic instantly. When you choose not to engage, there's nothing left for her to pull from. She may keep talking, raising her tone, or trying different approaches, but without your voice feeding into it, the fire begins to burn out. She's left standing in the middle of her own storm, realizing that the energy is one-sided. This isn't about ignoring her or pretending she doesn't exist. It's about refusing to let unnecessary arguments steal your energy. When you hold back your words, you show that you're in control of yourself. You're not allowing her emotions to dictate your state of mind. That calm presence disarms the argument more effectively than anything you could say in the moment. And here's the deeper truth. Most arguments aren't about the actual issue at hand. They're about testing your reaction. She wants to see if she can shake you, if she can pull you into her emotional frame. By staying silent, you show her that you're not easily moved, that strength speaks louder than any defense you could put into words. Over time, this pattern teaches her something important. Arguing with you doesn't give her the result she wants. If her words no longer pull you into battles, she adjusts. She becomes more mindful of how she approaches you because she realizes that arguments can't thrive without your participation. When you understand this, You stop wasting energy on conflicts that don't serve you. You stop explaining yourself endlessly. You stop fighting battles that were never meant to be won with words. Silence becomes your shield. And once you learn to use it, you'll see how quickly arguments lose their power without your voice. 7. Silence makes you more desired. One of the strongest outcomes of silence is how it changes the way a woman sees you. When you stop giving constant explanations, constant reassurances, and constant access, something happens. She begins to desire you more. Not because you're playing games, but because silence shows that you're not desperate. It shows that your world doesn't revolve around her approval, and that independence creates attraction. Men often get this wrong. Too many give away all their power by being overly available. You text back instantly, you pick up every call, you break your own plans just to prove how committed you are. At first, she might enjoy the attention, but over time, that constant availability makes her feel like she doesn't have to earn you. You've already made yourself too easy to reach, too easy to predict, and too easy to take for granted. Silence corrects this mistake. It reminds her that your time and energy are valuable. When you hold back, she feels the distance. She notices the gap. She begins to realize that your attention isn't unlimited. And if she wants more of it, she has to show up differently. That's when desire grows. She becomes more curious, more attentive, and more invested, simply because you're not flooding her with constant validation. But here's where men need to hear some constructive criticism. If your silence is coming from weakness, because you don't know what to say, or you're scared of confrontation, it won't work. Silence only creates desire when it comes from strength, not fear. If you're avoiding communication because you lack confidence, she'll sense that, and it will have the opposite effect. This is where you need to reflect. Ask yourself, are you silent because you're in control, or because you're unsure? If it's the second, then you have work to do. You need to build yourself into a man who doesn't just hide behind silence, but uses it with purpose. That means focusing on your goals, building your discipline, and being a man who has more going on than chasing validation from a woman. The truth is, silence makes you more desired because it shifts the balance of effort. When she feels she's not the center of your world, she naturally leans in to get closer. She respects you more because you respect yourself. And respect is the foundation of true attraction. So here's the challenge. Stop handing over all your energy for free. Stop reacting to every word, every mood swing, every demand for your attention. Use silence as a tool to protect your peace and remind her that your presence has value. The more you live this way, the more she'll crave your attention. Not because you're withholding it, but because she knows it's worth something when she gets it. Silence, when used with strength and purpose, doesn't just protect your power. It makes you the kind of man she doesn't want to lose. At the end of the day, silence isn't just about avoiding conflict. It's about control, respect, and self-value. Every man who learns to master it discovers that he doesn't need to over-explain, chase, or argue to be heard. Sometimes the loudest message you'll ever send is the one you never speak. And here's something that might sting a little. If a woman can predict every reaction you'll give, she doesn't fully respect you. That's the controversial reality most men don't want to face. Predictable men are easy to control. Silent men, disciplined men, are not. Silence shifts the power back where it belongs, with you. It makes her reflect, it makes her adjust, and it makes her value your presence more deeply. But don't forget, silence only works if it's coming from strength. If you're using it as an escape or out of fear, it loses its weight. This is about being intentional, being steady, and reminding both yourself and her that your voice is yours to use when you choose, not when she demands it. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever used silence in a relationship and noticed the shift it created? Or maybe you've seen how constantly reacting only made things worse. Share your experiences in the comments. I'll be reading through them and engaging with you there, because these conversations are where men grow the most. Remember, silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Use it wisely and watch how everything changes.